remember, Muslims have been misrepresented in the media. Without realising, the use of pessimistic synonyms create a negative connotation towards Muslims and Islam. I believe the media shapes society's perception on current affairs. So when the media is continuously portraying Muslims as dangerous and using them as a focal source of all terror against Britain, it's only inevitable for certain stereotypes to arise. My name is Hajara Osman, and I will be looking into the misrepresentation and stigma associated with Muslims in the British media, where it stems from, and how much is the media to blame. On June 19, 2017, a white van mounted the pavement on Seven Sisters Road, targeting Muslims coming back from the prayer during Ramadan. 9 were injured and 1 named dead.
It was just after midnight on the 19th of June. We just finished Taraweeh prayers. I didn't witness the attack itself, but one of the worshippers here in the mosque, he had witnessed the attack. I didn't quite understand from him the nature of the attack. I followed him. We ran, in fact, to the scene and found bodies scattered around, and people bleeding, and people and some screams and moans and groans of pain from the injured. The attacker, Hajara Osman, was restrained, and that's the scene that met us when we arrived.
Imam Mohammed arrived at the scene and noticed the people furious and planning to harm Hajara Osman. However, he quickly rushed to the crowd and removed the attacker from the scene, preventing any harm towards him.
The right thing to do was not to emulate his actions. His hateful and rage-fueled attack was not reciprocated by the reaction that he'd asked for, which was to be killed. He said, I did my bit, now kill me. He wanted to be martyred on the night for his unjust cause, and that request was not granted to him.
The next morning, Mohammed Mahmoud was named the local hero in the papers. I asked him how it felt to be referred to as a hero, which is different to the media's usual narrative of Muslims.
Being described as a hero was merely an attention-grabbing headline. I don't for a moment think that it was a heroic act. To do the normal thing is not heroic. To do something exceptional, yes, is heroic, and I don't believe that was an exceptional thing to do. The heroes are in fact the family of the deceased, the family of Makram Ali, and those who are still suffering from their injuries until today.
For as long as Mohammed has been an imam, he has noticed a change and how the discrimination affects the Muslim community.
There is a noticeable level of distrust towards the authorities, towards the media, towards groups that are perceived to all harbour the same ideological or religious beliefs against Muslims. Fear exists. It's a rational fear, it's not irrational. Muslims feel failed time and again. They are profiled, they are viewed with an eye of suspicion, an eye of doubt, harbouring violent agendas against the country that we love, and we've either been born or just grew up here or moved here because we saw a better future for ourselves and our children. And despite that, we're viewed as harbouring some sort of agenda.
I wanted to get an outside perspective, so I spoke to George, who had some interesting stories to share.
I made out with a girl with a headscarf once, and I felt really guilty afterwards.
George admits he didn't know much about Islam until he took a few classes at an all-girls school in high school, which evidently ended up shaping his view on Islam.
In my secondary school, for one of my lessons in sixth form, I would go to a different school, study science. It was an all-girls school. Due to past experiences, I was not sure on the religion. I didn't know much about it. So I was intimidated, and I was told already by a few of the students that I should not talk to them, because going up to one of the students, asking them for help in a science lesson, tapping her on the shoulder, and her frantically turning around at me and saying, you can't do that, that's against my religion, I can in fact go to hell if I'm talking to you right now without a male present. It was interesting, but I learned a lot.
I spoke to Hafsa Hajir, a Middlesex University student. With only a month left before Hafsa graduates, she expresses her concerns about entering the work field as a Muslim woman. Have you ever been a victim of discrimination?
Yes, when I applied to jobs specifically. I remember one time I applied to be a waitress in this Indian restaurant, and the guy told me that because of what I'm wearing, it would be a hazard. Also, at the current job that I worked on during the interview process, that I won't be able to work in certain places, such as weddings and hotels, because my scarf is not part of their uniform policy.
Majority of people, once they see that you're wearing a niqab, they just feel like you don't want to be involved. So most people will just not try to talk to you either, or avoid making eye contact. But you do get people who are very inquisitive, and they'll ask you questions, and I like that when people ask me questions. Sometimes they apologise immediately, saying I don't want to offend you, but I try to reassure them and let them know that no, I'm happy to answer your questions if you've got questions for me.
Recent studies have shown that there have been 40% increases in racist attacks within the UK just this year. So I asked myself, where does Islamophobia actually stem from, and can we push back against it?
Ignorance, more than anything else.
Ignorance.
Home, because most of our ideas come from home. So if you're brought up and you never met Muslim people, or you never saw people that were different from you, it's very hard for you to not discriminate and not be judgmental towards them.
People normally fear what they don't know. It's a matter of mere self-reflection. If such a person reflects just for a moment and thinks, how many restaurants have I eaten that are owned by Muslims? How many cabs have I gotten driven by Muslims? Buses, trains? How many accountants and lawyers and businessmen are Muslim? How many politicians? How many doctors? How many professionals in every sphere and in every facet of our lives here are Muslims? And how many of them have tried to poison my food, or crash the car I'm driving in, or deliberately tamper with my brakes if I send my car to a Muslim mechanic? If Muslims do in fact have an agenda to overthrow the government, or to take over this country, or have violent tendencies, then why is it that this hasn't been seen, except very rarely, isolated incidents where a fraction, they don't even represent a fraction of the Muslim population who have these violent and extremist ideologies, have carried out violent terrorist attacks.
What really annoys me out of everything is the hypocrisy of it all.
If we were all in on it, it's either the biggest secret kept in the world, which is just too preposterous to believe, and the only other option is that such a perception of Muslims isn't true.
Stuff like the Gulf War, the Afghanistan War, has created this evil version of Islam.
I think people are taught the wrong thing. Definitely teach it in schools. A lot of my friends from London, and outside of London especially, weren't taught anything. They were taught Catholic, and that's it.
George believes that schools should take religious studies more seriously. He mentions that his school didn't teach him much about Islam, and when they did, they covered it very briefly.
The way they cover it at our school was sort of, not darkly, but sort of in a way that it was not right. Or like, for instance, Catholics would be seen as, Jesus, Christmas, bright, same with Protestants, all of that, and then you turn to Islam and it'd be like, this is a very foreign, unknown thing to us, even though we're surrounded by more Muslims in the world than any other religion, if I'm fair.
Some people may not consider it Islamophobic or racist, but there are subtle reactions that people have.
Some people sit on the tube, and if someone starts praying whilst they're on the tube, some people think that's not praying, but them setting up, a bomb or something, which is horrible. And I think it's they must feel threatened, so I think it's a shame.
Some people have these reactions when they see a Muslim, either reluctance to sit near them, to double take and look back at them and view them with caution, as is the case if I'm on the bus or on the tube. And it's noticeable, and it's not something that is in your head if it occurs all the time. So there are quite obvious and overt Islamophobic attacks, and then there are people's reactions that display discomfort, unease around a Muslim. It is literally Islamophobic in that it is a fear of Islam or of Muslims, but not a malicious reaction.
To me, I think Islamophobia would be sort of ignorance towards someone's belief, really. It wouldn't just be Islamophobia specifically, but towards all religions and beliefs. It's just ignorance to understanding someone's way of life and how they perceive things. Islamophobia also is just horrible.
BBC reported that Islamophobic crime in London has gone up by 70%. So if the UK is so ethnically diverse, why does Islamophobia exist?
It's the media, definitely. The media always says Europeans are coming over here to take our jobs. They say Muslims are a threat, terrorism.
I think a huge part is also the media and how Muslims are portrayed.
It's a horrible misconception, but the media blows it up for them to be a whole different belief.
Muslims are usually seen as the perpetrators and not the victims.
It's basically the age-old concept of being scared of the other. This concept of Islam was always looked at negatively.
The media plays a huge role because a lot of the things that we believe, are influenced by how the media portrays them to us and the power the media has to create certain perspectives.
I think those stereotypes and that fear of Islam and other particular religions are still in today's society.
George is certain the reason the media fuels Islamophobia is because of money.
Of course, yeah, it sells to scare people, and it sells to intimidate people and make people fight, and then people fight and create more news, and then it just feeds off itself, I think.
Every time a terrorist attack happens, we're the only group of people that ever get asked to denounce it. But whenever a school shooting happens in the US and it's done by generally a white guy, nobody comes to white people or Christians and tell them, can you denounce the school shooting? It makes no sense.
George believes propaganda sells, and even though things would be much easier for everyone if the news weren't so negative, they wouldn't make any money from it.
The media needs to hate someone and influence the world to hate someone.
It generates particular stereotypes which then fuels Islamophobia.
It makes you feel like you're not part of the community to a certain extent.
I feel like sometimes it could be a barrier to getting people to see past it, to see who I am for who I am, and not continuously associate me with stereotypes that come with it.
It just feels weird, and you don't feel like you truly belong, and you just feel a bit like an outsider sometimes.
As I'm about to finish university, as I'm about to enter the workforce, I don't know, I feel a bit nervous.
The Independent reported that women were more likely to be attacked or abused if they were wearing the Islamic clothing.
My wife or my sisters who don the Islamic garbs and the headscarf, statements such as "go home," or especially in the aftermath of the horrific attacks that took place in Manchester and London Bridge and Westminster Bridge. A friend of mine who sports a beard was called a murderer recently.
One time, not too long ago, I was in the train station. It was quite dark at night. This man came up to me and started asking me, "Why are you dressed like that? What are you doing here?" And he was getting really loud and in my face. I was getting obviously scared. But the worst thing about the experience wasn't what he actually did. What really stuck with me was the fact that no one tried to help, and the train station was kind of full. And like no one. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, don't cry.
And yeah, like no one tried to come and help me or say anything, and people were just like looking and walking away. And then there was just there was one man. I was just standing there because I was just completely shocked. I couldn't even say anything to him. I couldn't reply to him. And then one man came to him and he was like, "You can't talk to her like that." And yeah, I just chose to forget it, kind of.
Hearing Kawthar's story was really touching. I remember I was only 16 when I first wore the veil, and although it wasn't easy, I did not have the same experience as Kawthar. People don't know how it feels like as a Muslim woman to leave your house every morning, preparing and expecting the worst. Growing up, I always saw myself as British. I never thought of myself as different. It was only when I wore the full hijab as a young woman that I noticed that I'm in fact the other. People were less friendly and started staring at me more on the trains and on the buses. It took me a while to realise that to them, I was weird.
I know this sounds low-key terrible, but I don't care about what you think of Islam. I just really do not care.
Muslims are humans too. You have some Muslims that are ignorant, you have Muslims that are generous, kind.
I don't like when people come up to me and be like, why in the religion of Islam it says this and this and this? It's a massive religion, it's a religion of 1.6 billion. If you don't like Islam or you hate certain things about it, that is your business.
Just meet someone and talk to them and find out what they like, because they're humans just like you, yeah.
The definition of Islam is submission. It's been in fashion to say Islam means peace. Peace is one of the meanings of Islam, but the literal meaning of Islam is submission, surrendering.
At this point, the call to prayer began, but Muhammad was kind enough to continue the interview.
So Islam is a comprehensive religion, a comprehensive way of life, to obey God. And in obeying God, we establish justice, equality, perform righteous deeds. Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ. Allah says, indeed Allah commands that you establish justice and perform righteous deeds. وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى, and to give those who are close to you, whether it's a blood relation or non-blood relation, to give those who are close to you. He forbids immorality and evil deeds and oppression and aggression. So this is part and parcel of our religion, and that's part and parcel of being a Muslim.
That's what I really respect about the belief, though. It's a very much more personal thing than I'm Catholic, here's my cross, I'm going to attack you. Power of Christ compels you, you know?
It is to honour the neighbour and to honour the guest. It is to revere the old and to be merciful to the young. To treat everybody with dignity regardless of their religion. This is what Islam is.
After conducting the interviews and listening to their stories, I realised that Islamophobia is still alive and more active than ever. There are more Kawthars and more Hafsas out there that are afraid and feel unsafe in their day-to-day lives. I can only hope that in the future, Britain becomes less hateful and grows to be a safe environment for Muslims. And for those who hold a negative view on Muslims, to educate themselves, because the Islam that the media portrays is not my Islam.
مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك